My stepfather left me nothing in his will, except a broken typewriter and a note that said, "Don't look back." I didn't listen. That's how all this started. Not with a courtroom brawl or a dramatic confession. Just a typewriter, rusted, jammed, worthless. Or so I thought. My name is Celine Quinn. I'm 27 years old, freelance software designer, and apparently the only person in my family who didn't matter when it came to my stepfather's legacy. At least, that's what his will said, word for word. I hadn't spoken to Bernard in almost 3 years. We'd been distant long before that, ever since my mother Iris passed away. She was the quiet genius behind everything his company built. I mean everything. The AI interfaces, the adaptive security protocols, even the original patent that launched his whole damn empire. But when she died, her name disappeared from the records, like she never existed. And me? I was the leftover. The inconvenient reminder. The day of the reading, I wore black. Not out of mourning, but because I knew exactly what I was walking into. Bernard's lawyer, some stiff in tortoiseshell glasses, looked at me like I was an intruder. Luca, Bernard's biological son, my stepbrother, sat with his legs crossed like he was already king. He even smirked when they got to my name. To Celine Quinn, the lawyer read, I leave the Olivetti Laterra, 32 typewriter currently stored in my private study. Nothing else. No house, no stock, no apology. Just that. And a damn antique. Luca chuckled. Guess he thought you'd appreciate something that can't connect to Wi-Fi. Laughter rippled through the room like it was some joke I didn't get. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, turned, and walked out. By the time I got home, the typewriter had already been delivered. It sat on my kitchen table like an insult, dusty, scratched, smelling faintly of oil and old paper. I didn't touch it for 2 days. I couldn't. But on the third night, I caved. I poured a drink, sat down in front of it, and just stared. It looked older than I remembered. My mom used to type on this when I was a kid. I could still hear the clack of the keys from her studio down the hall. There was a single yellowed envelope taped beneath the carriage. My name was written in Bernard's handwriting. Don't look back. That's all it said. Not love, Bernard. Not even a cold goodbye. Just a warning. Or maybe a threat. I flipped the typewriter on its side, looking for anything that might explain this twisted little inheritance. That's when I noticed the space bar didn't sit quite right. I pressed it and felt it click, but not in the usual mechanical way. More like unlocking something. I used a screwdriver to gently pry it up, and underneath the key, tucked into a shallow cavity, was a memory card. 128 gigabytes. Unlabeled. No explanation. My hands went cold. I slipped it into my laptop. The folder inside was encrypted, of course, but one thing caught my eye. A tiny icon labeled IRISCOREV1. My mother's name, her project. The one Bernard swore never made it past concept. The one she told me about once, late at night, when she thought no one else was listening. It wasn't a concept, it was real. And someone had buried it inside a broken machine and passed it off as garbage. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The typewriter wasn't meant for you. Stop digging. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my throat. I tried to call back. Voicemail. I opened the message thread. Gone. Nothing. Like it never happened. I stood, walked to the window. A black car idled across the street, headlights off. Just parked. Watching. Waiting. I dropped the curtain. My chest felt tight. And then I noticed something else. Under the glass cover of the typewriter, faintly etched in the metal frame, were words I hadn't seen before. If you remember her voice, you'll know what to do next. My breath caught, because I did remember. I remembered every whispered bedtime story, every secret she tried to pass on in silence, every look that said, they don't see you, but I do. I thought they'd buried her with nothing. Turns out, they buried her with everything. And now, they think I'll walk away quietly. They couldn't be more wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the message on my phone. The typewriter wasn't meant for you. Stop digging. It looped in my head like static, every syllable coded in threat. But the part that rattled me most? The word meant. Like I'd stolen something I wasn't supposed to find. But if that was true, why was my name carved underneath the carriage, in a language only my mother and I shared? I spent the next morning combing through the encrypted folder. Most of it was locked behind passwords I didn't know. But one file, just one, played without restriction. It was a voice memo. Grainy, old, but unmistakable. My mother. If you're listening, Celine, they've erased me. But they couldn't erase everything. Follow the letters. You'll understand when you see the code. Her voice cracked at the end, not with fear, but with exhaustion. I pressed my hand to my mouth and just sat there, shaking. She had recorded this for me. And Bernard. He knew. That's why he buried the machine, told me not to look back. He hadn't just taken her legacy. He'd tried to smother her voice. And Luca. He'd laughed, like this was a joke, like I was the punchline. I opened my laptop and began combing public patent records, starting with Bernard's company, Creative Edge. I searched for anything connected to Iris Core, her AI model, the one she'd been developing before she died. What I found made my stomach twist. 4 years ago, Creative Edge filed a patent for an AI predictive behavior engine, nearly identical to the notes I'd recovered. They'd rebranded it as AURA and built an entire smart home product line around it. It had won awards, been featured on Forbes, and credited entirely to Luca. There wasn't a single mention of Iris Quinn, not even a footnote. I clicked on an old promo video. There he was. Luca, in a sharp gray blazer, standing on stage at a tech conference, smiling like he'd invented the wheel. This technology was born from years of internal research, he said into the mic. It's the result of Creative Edge's bold vision, and a legacy I'm proud to carry forward. Legacy? He'd stolen her work, stripped her name from it, and then wrapped himself in the applause. And the world had clapped along, blind. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did what I knew how to do. I dug deeper. By evening, I had pulled enough metadata from the original voice file to trace its creation. It was recorded on a device I hadn't seen in years, my mother's old micronote recorder, the one she kept in the studio, the one that went missing the day after her funeral. I called the old family lawyer, Mr. Halbrook, someone I hadn't spoken to since I was 15. To my surprise, he answered. "Celine," he said, "I've been expecting this call." That stopped me cold. He told me that months before her death, Iris had come to him with a folder of notes and a sealed envelope. She'd wanted to place certain things in a legal trust, for me. But Bernard intervened. He threatened to revoke my license, Halbrook admitted. Said he'd accuse me of malpractice if I helped her move forward. She looked me in the eye and said, "Then I'll find another way." I never saw her again. I thanked him and hung up, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. She knew they would try to erase her, and she'd been fighting for me behind the scenes, even when I thought she'd given up. She hadn't been weak, she'd been silenced. I stared at the typewriter for a long time that night, its chipped keys, its rusted hinge, its hidden layers. That's when I saw it, an engraving on the inside of the bottom panel, barely visible under the right lighting. VS 1202. It didn't make sense, until it did. Those weren't just letters. They were initials and a date. VS equals Valeria Santos, her old lab partner from graduate school. 1202 equals December 2nd, the date of her final grant application. I opened my email and typed out a message to Valeria, praying the address still worked. Subject: You knew my mother. Message: I found her project. I found Iris Core. Please, tell me what she left behind. I hit send. Less than 5 minutes later, I received a reply. Don't use email. Meet me tomorrow at 11 a.m. You're being watched. I didn't sleep the night before meeting Valeria. I kept the lights off, the curtains drawn, and my phone on airplane mode. Paranoia? Maybe. But when someone tells you you're being watched, You don't ignore that. You adapt. The next morning, I wore plain clothes, tied my hair back, and left my apartment on foot, taking 3 different routes to shake anyone tailing me. I didn't touch public transit, didn't use my card, just walked until I reached the cafe Valeria had named. It was an old bookstore-turned-coffee shop. Quiet, off the main street. The kind of place that still used chalkboard menus and didn't believe in Wi-Fi. She was already there, sitting in the far corner, back to the wall, steaming mug in hand. I recognized her instantly from old photos my mother used to keep in her drawer. Valeria Santos, the woman my mother once called the only mind that ever made her feel seen. She looked up as I approached. Her eyes softened. "You have her hands," she said, and motioned for me to sit. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. I just sat there, absorbing the weight of the moment. "She tried to warn me," I finally whispered, but I didn't understand what I was holding until it was too late. Valeria nodded slowly. She left pieces. Everywhere. In backups. In code. In the typewriter. But they didn't just want her tech, Celine. They wanted her gone. I swallowed hard. "She said you could help me make sense of it. The blueprints, the logs, the voice memos. There's a file called Iris Core V1. It was hidden in the typewriter Bernard left me." Her eyes flashed. "He gave it to you?" "He left it in his will, with a note that said, 'Don't look back.'" Valeria scoffed. Arrogant as ever. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Listen to me carefully. That file? That's not just a prototype. It's a full AI consciousness model. Your mother cracked emotional prediction before any major company even touched the idea. If you have version 1, and they've launched a working product, they're using her code. Probably without even knowing how deep it goes." I felt my stomach twist. "So this isn't just theft, it's exploitation." Valeria nodded grimly. "If they've been feeding real-world data into her system, it's evolving, learning, which means if there's a flaw, or worse, a trap, they wouldn't even know it." We sat in silence for a moment. The cafe noise dulled into background hum. "Can you help me access the deeper layers?" I asked. "There's encrypted stuff I can't crack." She pulled a small flash drive from her coat pocket. "This will help, but once you open it, there's no going back. If you expose them, they will come for you, hard." "They already are." I told her about the car outside my apartment, the messages, the missing files, the voice memo. Her face darkened more with every word. Then she said something that made my heart skip. "There's something you don't know. Iris didn't die from illness, at least not in the way they said." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "She called me 2 weeks before she passed, said she found something, said she was scared, and then, silence." My vision blurred. "They told me it was rapid onset cancer." "That's what they told everyone, but she had no record of diagnosis, no hospice, no hospital check-ins, just gone." A cold wave swept over me. I couldn't breathe. "I think," Valeria said slowly, "she was silenced. Permanently. And I think you're the only loose end left." I staggered to my feet, heart racing. Before I could say a word, a crash shattered the cafe's silence. The front window exploded inward. Someone threw a brick. Shards of glass scattered across the floor. People screamed. I hit the ground, dragging Valeria down with me. When it settled, I saw the note tied to the brick with a red ribbon. I picked it up with shaking fingers. "She wasn't the only one. Your name's already on the list. Comment the number 1 if you want to see what Celine uncovers next, and who else might already be dead." I didn't run when the brick shattered the cafe window. I didn't scream. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, holding that red ribbon threat, and I knew this wasn't about silencing me anymore. This was panic. They knew I was getting close, and someone was finally afraid. That was my turning point. I left Providence the same night, took only what I needed: hard drives, the typewriter, Valeria's decryption keys. I stayed in a friend's cabin 2 hours north. No signal, No cameras. Just my laptop, a burner phone, and the sound of wind slicing through pine trees. And then I went to work. The files my mother left weren't just evidence. They were a weapon. Dozens of raw audio logs, development notes, chat transcripts between engineers who questioned Bernard's ethics and were quietly reassigned. Most chilling of all, recordings of board meetings, some without consent, where Bernard and Luca openly discussed discrediting Iris. "She's brilliant, but unstable," Bernard said in one file. "Let her break, then we'll rebuild it in our name." I copied everything to a secure drive, then compiled the story like code. Clean, brutal, undeniable. Dates, names, signatures. I even found a hidden folder my mother had encrypted under the name IRIS Final. It wasn't just a technical archive. It was a failsafe. Inside was a digital deadman switch, a timed auto-upload protocol that would send everything to the press, government agencies, and the top 5 investors in Creative Edge if I didn't manually reset it every 48 hours. And it was already counting down. Valeria helped me draft a statement. I didn't want to just burn them. I wanted the world to see every crack in their polished empire. The theft, the lies, the manipulation, the way they turned my mother's genius into their spotlight and her name into a whisper. But that wasn't enough. Not for me. I wanted to look them in the eyes when it fell apart. So I showed up. 3 days later, I walked into the Creative Edge HQ, unannounced, wearing the same black coat I wore to Bernard's will reading. The receptionist stared at me like I was a ghost. "I have an appointment," I said calmly. "With who?" "Everyone." I stepped into the elevator and hit the top floor. The board was in session when I arrived. Bernard at the head, Luca lounging beside him. There were 12 people in the room, 13, including me. I didn't ask for permission. I just walked in, opened my laptop, and connected to the room's projector. "What the hell is this?" Bernard snapped. I didn't speak. I just hit play. The first audio file filled the room. Bernard's voice, Luca's snide laughter, the discussion about erasing my mother's name. Gasps rippled around the table. A few board members looked visibly shaken. Others went pale. Then I spoke. "You built this company on her bones," I said, my voice steady. "You silenced her, stole from her, laughed when you thought she was too dead to fight back." Bernard stood, face red. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I snapped. "This is a reckoning." I turned to the board. "Check your inboxes." At that moment, the auto-send triggered. Every device in the room lit up. Phones vibrated, laptops pinged, screens filled with documents, source code, timelines. It was over. But then, the twist. Luca slammed his palm on the table. "You think you're winning, Celine? You think that dead woman outplayed us?" He reached into his briefcase and tossed a folder across the table. It slid to me. Inside were court filings. A legal motion declaring Iris Quinn mentally unfit, filed 4 days before her death. Signed by 2 medical professionals. I froze. "She was planning to transfer full IP rights to you," he sneered. "But we blocked it. Legally. That code you're so proud of, it belongs to us." The judge signed off. "Your name's not on a single document." My heart slammed against my ribs. Then Valeria stepped forward from the doorway. She'd followed me in, and dropped another folder on the table. "This judge?" she said. "He retired under investigation last year. And those 2 doctors? Both have financial ties to Bernard." She paused, then smiled. "Oh, and we recorded this entire meeting, including your confession. I always wondered what justice would feel like. Not the kind in courtroom dramas or headlines. Real justice. The kind that doesn't just punish. It corrects. It reclaims." 2 weeks after that boardroom showdown, I stood in federal court with Valeria by my side. The evidence was overwhelming. Bernard and Luca had been subpoenaed. Their lawyers tried to stall, pivot, claim the files were falsified. But everything was verified. Dates, signatures, timestamps. The board caved. Fast. Bernard was stripped of his title. Luca was removed from every executive position across the Creative Edge portfolio. Their personal accounts were frozen pending investigation. The company's stock plummeted 40% in 3 days. By the end of the week, 2 major investors pulled out entirely. And then came the bombshell ruling. The judge reviewed the IP ownership documents and the forged mental health filings. Both doctors listed had been bribed. The judge who had signed off on the suppression order disbarred last year for a pattern of unethical behavior. My mother's patent rights were reinstated. Every invention built from Iris Core was officially declared her intellectual property. And because I was her legal heir, everything they'd built on her brilliance now belonged to me. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. I didn't. What I felt was clarity. The empire they stole was no longer a lie. It was mine. But not to hoard, not to flaunt. It was meant to be restored, to the purpose she intended. I renamed the company Iris Core Technologies and moved headquarters into a co-op space shared by women-led startups. We launched a grant program in her name for underrepresented AI researchers. No legacy applicants, no nepotism, just vision. But Bernard? He didn't go quietly. He tried to go on camera, spin it as a misunderstanding, blame the lawyers, blame overzealous staff. But the public wasn't buying it. A leaked video of him shouting at a young female reporter during an ambush interview went viral. His reputation shattered. Luca was worse. He didn't show his face. But one night, I received a letter. No envelope, just paper slipped under my office door. "You've ruined us. I hope it was worth it." I read it once, then shredded it. Because here's the truth. I didn't ruin them. They did that all by themselves. All I did was turn on the lights. The final blow came the day the media published a never-before-seen video of my mother. It was her at a tech conference years ago, speaking quietly about innovation, ethics, and legacy. "True brilliance doesn't need applause," she said. "It just needs protection." I watched that clip on loop for hours. Not because I missed her, because I understood her. All those years, I thought she was fragile, passive, silenced. She wasn't. She was building something, brick by brick, in the shadows. And she left it to me, not because I was the strongest, but because she knew I could finish it. And I did. The last time I saw Bernard, he was sitting in the back row of a small courtroom during a licensing dispute, hearing he no longer had the power to control. He didn't look angry, just hollow, like a man watching a building burn that he thought was fireproof. He caught my eye. I didn't look away, and I didn't smile, because this wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about truth, and I'd already won. As I walked out of that courtroom, sun hitting my face, I whispered the final words my mother once told me as a child, words I didn't understand back then, but carried me through everything. Let them take everything. What's real will find its way back to you. And it did. Comment the number 1 if you want more stories like this, because some legacies aren't given, they're taken back. And if you're still here, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.